I'm not going to re-preach my sermon from previous weeks, so if you want to catch up, you can get it on the web. It'll be right on the right in the first location of the home page at blackhillscoc.org, and from here on out, I'll have a link to Megan, and she'll put that in the bulletin going forward, so anybody who wants to can catch up. I do want to, however, just say that the premise of this idea of virtual reality revolves around the fact that, and I'm trying to express a concept that's extremely difficult for us to. Are you guys hearing that buzz? That hum? It's driving me insane. I'm not sure what it is, but oh man, this idea of virtual reality, of the fact that what you're experiencing. So the premise is walking by faith, among many other things, but a walking by faith for this particular study is acknowledging that my experience in the now is not entirely real. And by that I mean that there is another much more significant reality that we can't see, that we can't experience with our five senses, right? So the first piece of that, obviously was a discussion on God. And in the process of introducing the idea, and of course I didn't spend anywhere near enough time talking about Yahweh, but I did bring up this idea of Elohim and the concept that that Yahweh is one of many Elohim in the Bible. And I mentioned last week that it was something that was a real theological stumbling block for me, because I had kind of always grown up assuming that the idea of multiple gods out there, multiple little g gods out there, multiple supernatural forces, actors in the supernatural realm, was of course there's God and then Satan and angels, but this idea that there were demigods, let's say, smaller, less significant, major actors on the supernatural stage is something that, and I listed a whole bunch of passages, 1 Chronicles 16:25 and several in Psalms. The one that really stumbled me many years ago was that one in Psalm 135 verse 5. And it basically just says, speaking to Yahweh, you're above all of the Elohim, right? So we've got these two words. God's name, Yahweh, and He is, by title, one of the Elohim, right? You guys tracking with me? And so anyway, what I was going to do this week was talk a little bit about the Angel of Yahweh. That is such an amazing study, but I don't have enough time to do it and this piece. So we'll come back to the Angel of Jehovah later. What I want to do today, and then next Sunday, we're going to talk about Satan. And I want to challenge your thinking on all of these things. We have a tendency. So and we're going to do this in a few weeks or a month or so. I've been working on a series that is complex enough that it just doesn't lend itself to a series of Sunday mornings. So what we're going to do, it may be too it may not be possible to get it all put together by December. I'd like to do it in December. But we're going to do a deep dive and just take a Saturday and spend 5 or 6 hours together eating a meal and really digging down deep into some things that I just don't think lend itself to doing what we do typically on Sunday morning. But what I want to do is I want to challenge the way that you guys think about several things. And there's a whole list of them. You know, what is heaven? And what is hell? And typically, where do you get your picture of heaven and hell? Where does that come from? You know, if I were to ask you, you know, real quick, just describe for me what you think hell's going to be like, what would you say? Well, and I don't expect you to answer, but my guess is you're going to say, you know, it's fire, and it's darkness, and you know, it's kind of like you know, torture chamber, right? I mean, that's, you know, and it just goes. I mean, basically, how long is that going to last? Well, it's, you know, it just goes on forever and ever and ever, right? So where did you get that picture of what hell looks like? And my guess is that the vast majority of that picture comes from, oddly enough, the Renaissance painters. And if I were to ask you what heaven's going to be like, equally you would say, I mean, we do have that temptation to have fluffy clouds, right? And, you know, naked babies with wings and, you know, that kind of thing. Where did we get that picture? Well, we got that picture also from the Renaissance paintings and from my grandmother's family Bible that used to sit on the coffee table in her home. So we have all of these preconceived ideas about what the supernatural realm looks like. And if I don't get anything else stated today, I do want to get this idea that we started this series talking about the reasonable faith that we have, that it is reasonable for us to put our faith in a creative God. And you know, all the way through that, you guys were nodding your heads like this. So that's a good thing. I like it when you nod your heads like this. But we're about to enter into a section that I think, and especially since now we're putting this up on the web, I think that there are many who find it easy to embrace creationism and a creative God, and who are going to find it very difficult to embrace what we're about to look at. Because when we talk about a creative God, that's a concept that, you know, that we can kind of make a case for, even scientifically. So I can sit down with you and I can tell you why, from a scientific point of view. I'm no scientist, but I mean, I've done the math, and I believe that it's reasonable for me to believe in a creative God. But when you start talking about other actors on the supernatural stage, it starts to sound like we've kind of gone bonkers. Right? Right? I mean, does that make sense what I'm saying? I mean, when I start talking about demons, when I start talking about spiritual things that go bump in the night, you know, those kinds of things, then all of a sudden people who are up to now maybe have been patient with me in my ranting about a reasonable faith. When we start talking about supernatural actors on the stage, and especially when you start talking about the fact that these supernatural actors on the stage interact with me in a way that isn't quantifiable, I can't put any metrics on it, I can't prove that it's happening. I can't sit down and show you a DNA strand that proves that there's a demon out there or that Satan really exists. But if you're going to embrace Yahweh and you're going to embrace the narrative of the Old and New Testament, you absolutely cannot dismiss this particular topic. And so what we're going to do for the next few minutes is kind of set the stage. I said we'd get this slide done. We may not, but that's okay. We'll get it started and then maybe finish it up next week. But the first thing that I want to point out is that the bizarre well, bizarre is probably a good word. The bizarre thing about God is that He has ultimate power and ultimate authority. And the whole church said, yeah, amen, right? The bizarre thing about this ultimate God that we serve, Yahweh, the bizarre thing about Yahweh is that He has this crazy fixation on sharing His authority with other people, or with other actors, shall I say. So the opening pages of the Bible, Yahweh creates this incredible universe, and his crowning achievement is these image-bearing characters by the name of Adam and Eve that He creates and puts in this garden paradise, and He invites them to share in His rule of this new thing. Now, as you guys hear me say every time I touch on Genesis 1, 2, and 3, I'm that guy that believes it just happened like that. I don't make any apologies. I think it's a simplistic telling of, the events that transpired, but I believe that there really was a place on this earth that was somewhat of the capital of God's rule over the entire planet, and He invited humanity to step into a role of rulership with Him, to share that rulership with Him. And as a result of an interaction with I believe, a supernatural being, Adam and Eve made the decision to seek their own power and to define what is right and wrong on their own terms, right? So that's kind of Genesis 1, 2, and 3. Well, interestingly, there is a council of spiritual beings that God has also invited to share in His rule of the universe. Okay? You say, well, John, how do you know that? Well, I know that because Job chapter 1, which I don't have time right now to drill down into, but in Job chapter 1, the narrator says, there was a day when God called together His staff. Okay? God called together His, and he was having for lack of a better term, He was having a business meeting, right? And you say, well, why would God need to have a business meeting? He has all power, all authority, all wisdom. I know, but again, for some reason, He has this fixation on sharing His rulership. And so He invites this group of characters called the sons of God to come in and to visit with Him. And so they all present themselves before Jehovah, before Yahweh. And into that meeting also comes, I believe, one of the sons of God, this adversary character who also comes into that meeting, right? So again, not going to take the time to drill down into Job right now, but if you want to look at Job chapter 1, it's all there. What I do want to do is I want to say that, now I'm going to do this, and it's going to open up enough questions that there'll be more questions at the end of this sermon than there'll be answers. And one of the reasons for that is that the Bible never stops to describe what demons are, to describe what angels are, to describe what the other supernatural characters and actors on the supernatural stage are. It doesn't, because what is the focus of the Bible? Huh? Yahweh. Yahweh is the focus on the Bible, of the Bible. So the Bible is not going to spend an awful lot of bandwidth, shall I say. It's not going to burn a lot of bandwidth talking about demons and angels and that kind of thing. They are not the primary actor in the biblical narrative. The primary actor is Yahweh. So it's going to focus most of its attention on that, but you can't tell the narrative, you can't unveil the narrative of this benevolent God, this creative God, who has invited humanity and supernatural creatures into rulership roles, and then some of them rebelled. In fact, every one of us in this room, are rebels against the power and authority of Jehovah, or have been. Right? So, I was going to spend the time to read Daniel 10. Yeah, let's do it. If we have to do 2 weeks on this, we'll do 2 weeks on this. You got to see this. Now, the book of Daniel is divided up into 2 pieces. The first half of the book of Daniel is historical, and the second half is what we typically refer to as apocalyptic. I hate that terminology, but the second half is full of, beasts coming up out of the water and all sorts of symbolism, and you can't. Even the most literal people on the planet, when it comes to biblical interpretation, cannot read, Daniel chapter 7, for instance, without saying, well, yeah, some of that's figurative. Some of it's, figurative. So in Daniel, you remember the dream of the big statue, and the king was all, shall we say, freaked out about it, and he was asking the Magi, what does it mean? And they say, well, tell us what the dream is. You remember that? And he said, hey, if you're Magi, you can tell me what the dream was. And then tell me what the meaning was. And if you can't tell me what the dream was and then what the meaning was, I'm going to kill you. So it's like a really bad day at the office for these particular Magi. They were having a tough day. It's probably a Monday. Coffee pot was not working in the break room, and then up pops this guy Daniel, and Daniel says, I can tell the king what his dream. Well, I can't. My God, I love this. My God can reveal what his dream was, and I can tell you what the interpretation is. And you remember the dream was about these four world dominating powers: Babylon, the Medo-Persians that come in after Babylon, the Grecian Empire that comes in after that, and then the Romans. And so a lot of this section, the last half of the book of Daniel, is a focus on these world-dominating powers and the fact that they are crushing God's people, all of them. But there's good news. And the good news is that in the fourth kingdom, which is the fourth kingdom, Babylon's first, Medo-Persia is the second, Greece is the third, and Rome is the fourth. He says, in that fourth kingdom, there's coming a change. God's going to set up his kingdom. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of what's going on in the last half of Daniel. Chapter 10. I'm going to bet that not many of you have seen this. Daniel chapter 10, verse 7. I, Daniel, we probably should start at the beginning, but for the time being, verse 7, I, Daniel, was the only one who saw the vision. The men with me did not see it, but such terror overwhelmed them that they fled and hid themselves. Anybody in here ever had that happen? That you were just so terrified that you just ran and hid? I don't remember that ever happening to me, but I suppose that's possible. They were overwhelmed with terror and they ran and hid. So these were the people that were with Daniel when he saw this vision. So I was left alone, gazing at this great vision. I had no strength left. My face turned deathly pale and I was helpless. Then I heard him speaking, and as I listened to him, I fell into a deep sleep, my face to the ground. A hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said, Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you. And when he said this to me, I stood up trembling. Now, who's he talking to? He's talking to one of these supernatural actors. This isn't Jehovah. If you look at the context, he's talking to a supernatural actor, and he's not defined in any real sense of the term. But check this out, because this is where the plot, as they say, thickens. I stood up trembling. Verse 11. Oh man, I'm already out of time. Then he continued, do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince, now underline this word, prince. So what do you think of when you hear the word prince? Well, you think of somebody born in the palace, right? Well, that is not what we are talking about here. And you're going to see why I say that in just a second. But the prince of Persia, the prince of the Persian kingdom, resisted me. So this is a supernatural being that's talking to Daniel. And he says, I have come in response to your words, but I was detained. Why was this supernatural actor, why was he detained? Well, he was detained by the prince of Persia. But the prince of Persia, the Persian kingdom, resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the, chief princes. Well, who are we talking about here? Who do you know by the name of Michael? Well, yeah. So in this particular discussion, I'm assuming an angel is talking to Daniel, and he says, I was on my way to come chat with you, but I was detained for 21 days because I had to deal with the prince of Persia, the supernatural prince of Persia. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come. And then look at 10 verse 20. So he said, do you know why I have come to you? Soon I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go, the prince of Greece will come. Well, what Daniel is giving us here, and this deserves an awful lot more time than I've got to give it, but what Daniel is giving us here is a peek into the supernatural realm with conflicts going on between princes, angelic, supernatural beings who are, can I say, animating certain nations. So you've got this Persian supernatural force that's working to animate Persia, and you've got this other one, Greece, that's on the rise. And what he's showing us, what we experience in the physical realm, is one nation falls and another nation rises up. But what Daniel is showing us is that in the supernatural realm, there is warfare going on that causes nations to fall and nations to rise. Does that make sense? Are you guys seeing that? Okay. I gotta put this plane on the ground here, but I want to start this section, the powers and authorities. So these supernatural actors are all over the place. The most amazing supernatural actor on the stage is this angel of God, which I don't have time, but we will talk about this character. And every time he appears, he is, you have a problem distinguishing whether it's actually God, Jehovah, or whether it's an angel. And it's that way on purpose. He's the physical manifestation of Yahweh. Do you know anybody else who's a physical manifestation of Yahweh? Okay, John chapter 14, verse 30. Well, let's start with verse 28. Jesus is saying, "You heard me say I'm going away, and I'm coming back to you. If you love me, you would be glad that I'm going to the Father. For the Father is greater than I. I have told you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe. I will not speak with you much longer, for the prince of this world is" what? Coming. Well, who's that? Well, it's the adversary. It's the supernatural force that's animating all of and coordinating all of the dark things that are happening on this planet. So Jesus, even in his teachings to his disciples, touches on this, that these supernatural princes, shall we say, are at work. And Jesus says, the prince of this world is coming. What? Now, I don't know for sure, but my conjecture is that what he's talking about is that, I love this, Satan has been wandering around on this planet, pushing people around, causing trouble, and finally, this white, I don't know whether Jesus wore white robes, I don't know, but for this particular thing, this white-robed character walks right up to the adversary, taps him on the shoulder and says, "You and me, we're going to go around. Meet me on that hill right outside Jerusalem." And Satan threw everything that he had to throw. And my master said, I can beat this. We'll get to that. But real quickly, all right, one more. we're not going to get to the big ones, but we'll get to one more. Turn over to Romans 8. I don't know, you know, this is, you guys, if there's one passage that John Dennis has quoted more than any other, it's probably Romans 8. This is kind of my home. This is kind of my home page in IT vernacular. Verse 28. For we know that in all things God works for good for those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. For those God foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of His Son, that He might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those that He predestined, He also called. And He called, those He called, He also justified. Those He justified, He also glorified. What then shall we say in response to all of this? Well, that's a good question. If God is for us, who on the planet or beyond the planet can stand against you? Is that not just the best? Is that not just the best? I mean, if Yahweh, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if Yahweh, the Elohim of Moses, if that guy is for you, I mean, who's going to be against you? If He didn't say no on the cross, verse 32, that's John Dennis's paraphrase, He who did not spare His own Son, but gave Him up for us all, how will He not also, along with Him, graciously give you all things? Who will bring any charge against those whom God has chosen? It is God who justifies. Well, I think Dan Green's a knucklehead. Well, God's already justified him. So, I mean, it don't matter what you think about Dan Green. He already stands justified before the supreme authority in the entire universe. I just thought about the fact this is going to be on the web. Then, you know, people are going to be saying, "Wow, that's a strange bunch of people right there." It is God who justifies. Who is it? Who is He that condemns? Christ Jesus, who died, more than that, who was raised to life, is at the right hand of God and is also interceding for us. Here we go, verse 35. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? As it is written, for your sake we face death all day long, etc. Verse 37. No, in all of these things we are more than conquerors through Him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither... What? Angels or demons, neither the present or the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. And the whole church said, sign me up. Yep. That's good news. So, when we get to Ephesians, and several other places, 1 Peter, we're going to see that curtain on the supernatural realm is going to be open, and we're going to see an awful lot more of this activity that's going on. Not that it's our focus, but the Bible's also not going to gloss over it either. There's a supernatural layer to the universe that we navigate, and in that supernatural layer there are forces arrayed that are for us, and there are forces arrayed that are against us. And there are forces arrayed that are that have plans for nations, and both good and bad. It may give you some sense of why it's important for us to be people of prayer, right? Because it's at that moment that we are actually waging war in the supernatural realm. All right, we got to quit. We got a lot more to cover, but God willing, we'll be back together next week and we'll address it.